Hello, biology students. We are talking about a lab called Why Don't Oil and Water Mix? It's on the Concord Consortium website, so follow the directions on your lab sheet to log in with the class word, and we'll get going. We're investigating why oil and water, which you may have seen the combination in salad dressing. You kind of shake up that salad dressing, and then eventually it all settles out. You have to pour it quick before the oil and water separate. We're going to look at that phenomenon and look at the molecules involved and figure out why that happens. We're going to investigate the interactions and the associated energy with those interactions between molecules, especially water molecules and some other molecules that change how those interactions affect biological processes. So in class, we looked at how liquid food coloring dropped in water at different temperatures spread out. When we used liquid food coloring in hot water, it spread out very quickly because we decided those molecules are moving faster. When we dropped food coloring in cold water, it diffused or spread out in the water very slowly. We decided because the molecules are moving much slower at colder temperatures. So here we have to make a drawing. When we drop liquid, draw the model of the molecular level to show what you think will happen to solid sugar candy when you dissolve it in cold room temperature and warm water. So we're going to actually make two drawings. I'll use my pen tool here. I'll put warm at the top. This is warm water, and this is going to represent hot water down here. I'm going to draw a big piece of sugar. Our sugar candy had red stripes. Oh, I didn't quite get my red stripes here. So that's representing the big piece of candy. And then as the candy starts to dissolve, they're going to be little pieces. I'll use the circle tool here to make lots of little circles. Really quickly here, of the sugar candy dissolving. Water molecules are actually coming out and grabbing those. They're coming in to hang out with the water molecule, and they're picking up or kind of pulling off sugar molecules. And the sugar molecules I've drawn here, these little dots, are not great representations of sugar molecules, of sucrose molecules, but I don't have great definition in this program. And then I'm going to draw my water molecules with a stamper tool here. I'm going to pick water here and just stamp a bunch of water molecules close to the big piece of sugar, and then kind of also showing that they're pulling off the little pieces of sugar. And there's a lot going on here. It's hot water, so there's lots of little pieces, lots of molecules of sugar being pulled off the big sugar candy. Oh. In cold water, we're going to see a slightly different pattern here. Things aren't going to be happening quite as fast, and not quite as many dissolved sucrose or sugar molecules are going to be pulled off the big piece of candy right away. Those sugar molecules got a little bit too big here. I can fill in my candy with some, we'll make this one blue to show that it's in cold water, and then I'll put some water molecules with my stamper tool here. to show that the water is pulling those molecules off the big piece of sugar. And there's a little slower action going on here, not as many small pieces of sugar, the small molecules are coming off in the cold water, because cold water, the molecules are moving slower. So more sugar is being dissolved hot water because the water molecules are moving faster. Now you should write your own answer with something similar. So now that I'm done, I can click the done box here. It's going to save my drawing. And we can move on. I can scroll down, I can hit submit. It's going to lock that, and that's so I can kind of change my answer as we go along. We're making a prediction here, and we don't want to change our prediction. We want to see if our hypothesis, our prediction, meets with some data that we're going to learn about here. And then we explained our prediction, we submitted it, our answer is now locked, and we hit the next button down here. So we have some more work to do here. Our main guiding question here is what happens in the process of dissolving? What at the molecular level is going on? If this is sugar right here, it has a lot of potential energy. And we're going to see what happens to that potential energy as we add water. So our question here that we're trying to answer is describe how the pattern of interactions between the various molecules changes as the substance is dissolved by another. So let's pretend this is sugar. Let's play it. The sugar molecules are moving, but they're in a solid, so they're not moving very quickly. We're going to add water. And watch what happens to the potential energy here as we add water. And watch kind of what happens to the green molecules that are representing sugar here, our big piece of candy at the molecular level, and how that's interacting with our water molecules that are red. Red is for oxygen, that electronegative molecule, and white is the hydrogens that share electrons with oxygen, but oxygen is kind of an electron hog. It has the electron most of the time, so there's a dipole that develops. So describe how the pattern of interactions between the various molecules changes as the substance is dissolved by water. So let's start this over so you can write your own answer here. So here's how the green sugar molecules are interacting in the beginning. They have a lot of potential energy. And then as we play it, we can see they're moving a little bit as we add water. The potential energy changes, and those interactions between the green molecules and the red molecules start to happen. So hopefully, after you've looked at the interaction here in the simulation, you can answer question 3. How does the potential energy right here change as you run the simulation? You can stop it, reset it, add water, and run it again to see how that changes. And then we have question 4, which is draw a model that shows what's happening to the piece of candy as it dissolves. Show 3 steps. So the very beginning where you have the whole candy just sitting there in the water, then kind of as it's dissolving, and then show it after it's dissolved. And you can use this model as some clues. We'll reset it. This is kind of just as you're putting the candy in. This is kind of in the middle of dissolving. You can see those water molecules kind of coming in and grabbing those sugar molecules. And then you can play it until the end and see what's going to happen at the end. So when you've written your answers to 2, 3, and made a drawing for number 4, you'll be ready to move to the next page. So you want to stop the video, put in your own answers, and then you can continue to the next page. This next page we're focusing on in this particular part is how does the polarity of substances affect their solubility? So what dissolves in water and what doesn't? So question 5 is, which of these substances do you think will dissolve in water? And you can use your personal life experience to figure out what things you know dissolve in water. Hexane is kind of like paint thinner or mineral spirits. It behaves the same way. Sugar you've worked with probably in your kitchen. Iodine is stuff you put on cuts. Oil is like salad oil, olive oil, safflower, sunflower, canola oil that you might have in your kitchen. And ethanol is a type of alcohol. It's similar to the rubbing alcohol you might put on a cut. Ethanol is actually the stuff that's in beer, wine, and vodka. But it's used in science for various things and also in industry. So as you check off things here, explain why you think those substances will dissolve in water. You can get some hints over here. You can look at the molecular structure and the surface charge, whether these are charged or polar or not. So water is very polar. Sugar is polar. It's got these oxygens in here hogging the electrons and creating little bits or spots of negativity. And then everything else kind of is the blue, which gets positive. Ethanol has an oxygen in it, so it has that polar. It has a negative and positive areas. These blue areas are a little bit positive because the electrons are hogged by oxygen. Hexane is all just carbon sharing its electrons evenly. Iodine shares its electrons evenly because it's two of the same molecules with the same electronegativity. And then there's oil, which is all the same carbons and hydrogens, and they share well. So these are not polar here, and these are polar. So that's something to pay attention to when you're making your predictions. Question 7 is, which of these substances do you think will dissolve in hexane? Notice hexane is nonpolar, and water here at the very top of the chart is polar. So hexane is nonpolar, water is polar. They might behave a bit differently. So for question 7, keep that in mind. Question 8 is, explain why you think what's going to dissolve in hexane will dissolve in hexane. And you can use this chart here, this table, to make some good predictions, to have some information to base your hypothesis on. Because in a moment here, we're going to actually do this experiment and see which substances do dissolve in hexane and water. So pause the video, write your answers, and then we'll move on. So on our next page here, we'll test these substances for their solubility. And I've actually mixed these substances together so we can observe each substance and how it mixes with hexane and water. So you can write down your own observations about what mixes and what doesn't. So you can write in this table here, we'll look at hexane and water here. I mixed these earlier. Here's water and hexane. I can mix it up a little bit. The water I dyed blue so it's easier to see because hexane is also clear. You can see that at first they mix, but in a moment here you can see the water, it's starting to form at the bottom a separate layer. And in a moment or two we'll see a clear layer at the top. We'll let it sit for a while we look at hexane with water. This one's settled. I mixed hexane with water's on the bottom, it's blue, and hexane is the clear stuff on top. And I mixed this one up just like the last one, but you can see after sitting for a while, it will mix at first, just like the other one did. But if we look like the other one we just mixed, this is hexane with water again, it's forming two distinct layers. And there's a little bit of clear layer at the top. So I would say that hexane and water, they don't mix. One's polar, one's not polar. So let's look at water with water. I took water and I added more blue water. I mixed it up. It's all still blue. Pretty simple. I'll let you figure that one out. Oh, sorry, I messed up on this one. This was hexane with hexane. When you mix hexane with hexane, everything just is fine. Hexane is just clear. So hexane with hexane is just clear. Hexane with water makes two distinct layers and doesn't mix. So hexane and water doesn't mix. Hexane with hexane mixes just fine. It's all clear, it's all hexane. No separate layers. So hexane mixes. Water with water we saw mixes. It's just plain old blue, pretty easy. And water with hexane doesn't mix. You get two separate layers, and eventually if it sits long enough, this layer in the middle that looks like it's mixing will go away. We'll check in with that in a little bit. Doesn't mix. I'll fix my grammar here. Doesn't mix. Okay, sugar. This is sugar with hexane. So remember, hexane's clear. This is the sugar in the bottom, this white substance. And if I shake it up, I can shake all I want to. But sugar with hexane isn't going to mix. Sugar and hexane is a no-go. I put sugar in this tube of water and mixed it up. Definitely fine. Iodine's a tricky one because the only iodine I had was a yellow substance here. It was a solution of iodine in water. some of the iodine in the solution moved into the hexane. So some of the iodine is coloring the hexane pink here. So you can see the pink hexane, which means some of the iodine from the water solution moved into that hexane. Iodine normally doesn't mix with water, but since it's in a solution of water, we're supposed to be using solid iodine, but I only had liquid iodine. And when I put a solution of iodine with water, it turned it green. The yellow solution of iodine turned the blue water green. So, yes, it mixes with hexane, and we'll just qualify this. Iodine in solution mixes with water. Iodine in a water solution. You can make iodine dissolve in water, iodine ions, if you use a salt of iodine, and that's a little bit of a chemistry trick. Oil with water, well, we know about how well those get along. Here's oil and water. This might kind of look like some of your salad dressing. You can imagine this is like a darker vinegar. If I mix this up, it looks like it's mixed for a while, but if I let it sit, you can already start to see the little bit of blue forming on the bottom and the oil, the yellow oil rising on the top. I mixed some oil with a hexane, and it's not separating. The hexane just turned yellow with my olive oil color, and they mixed just fine. So oil and hexane mixed. Ethanol I dyed red so you can tell it apart from water. Here's ethanol and hexane. You can see they're very separated. This test tube's been sitting for a while. If I shake them up and we watch them for a little bit, they will separate just like they were. If I put the blue alcohol with water, it makes purple. They mix just fine. And the blue water and the red alcohol make a purple solution. So I have a sheet with photos of all of these mixtures, and after they've settled and kind of had a chance to separate out or not separate, and I will also put that in the description for this video. So your job is to finish filling out this table and find a pattern. See if you can see what kinds of substances tend to dissolve in water. You can go back to the previous chart and look at polar versus non-polar if you want. Make sure you take a picture of your chart before you do that so you don't lose your work. You can take a snapshot of your chart. When you're done, click this button, but it's your job to fill out the rest of the chart and then take a snapshot. You can look at the chart after you take a snapshot. You can go back a screen and look at some of those the polar versus non-polar and see if you can find a pattern. And this question 11 asks you more about what kinds of substances are going to dissolve in a non-polar substance like hexane. And again, go back to the previous chart. Here, I'll take my snapshot so I can move back. I'm done. Obviously, your chart should totally be filled out. I'm not going to do that for you. We can go back. You can use this chart here in the previous screen to kind of formulate to have some evidence to formulate your answers for question number 10 and 11. Once you've typed your answers for 10 and 11, you can hit the next button and we will work together in another video to talk about 6 through 10. So this is the end of video 1 for why don't oil and water mix. There will be a video 2, and that's how you can finish your lab.